Good afternoon to all my students, and I am welcoming you to the second part of the video on our topic 2, which is Greek participles. I believe you have listened to the first part of the video, and I believe that you will have understood what is done therein. I'm also asking you to watch this second part of the video so that by the time we start our facilitation later today, you will have a good ground to start. Aha, that's good. I am on my face cap and on t-shirt belonging to NOUN, branded NOUN. This is the logo of the university, and that is because today is Wednesday, which happens to be our advocacy day. So without wasting your time, I will invite us to class right away. Hello, good evening, my dear students. You are welcome to the second part of the video on our topic for this week, participles in Koine Greek. I am Olubi Adeni Adewale, and I'm going to take you through the remaining parts of the studies in participle now. Now, in the first part, we looked at the following. We did a definition to the participle by stating basically that a participle is actually a verbal adjective, a verb from which adjectives or a noun have been derived. We also came across the fact that the use of participle in Koine Greek is so many that Koine Greek has been called a participle loving language. And we went through the various functions of the participle, and we also went through the various forms of the participle, especially writing the present participle in the active voice, in the middle voice, in the passive voice, using luo as our example. Now, let's go on with the participles. Now, today we are going to begin by looking at the adjectival function of a participle. As an adjective, the participle will have to agree with the noun it is modifying in gender, in number, and in case. Remember that every noun has gender, every noun has number, and every noun has a case with which it is functioning. As an adjective, the participle can also be used substantively. In other words, we can use it on its own to be the subject of a phrase or a sentence. Now, let's look at the example here. Oluon will mean the losing man. Why would this mean the losing man? Because we know that luon is a masculine form of the participle, and we also know that o is the definite article telling us the. Now, so it's like saying the losing man, or the man who loses, or he who loses. In every way you have to interpret it, it has to be masculine in its outputs. Care has to be taken when participle is used in this way, because you have to do a relative translation so that the full significance of the construction will be given. Let's look at the following examples. Blepon ton legonta tauta. I see the one who is saying these things. Legonta, that is our participle. Ton, the one or he who is saying these things. Now, let's look at the second sentence. Eblepsa ton legonta tauta. You will discover that this blepo is present tense. Eblepsa is your aorist, which stands for the past tense. Eblepsa ton legonta tauta. I saw the one who was saying these things. Now, let's come back to the third sentence. Blepo tus legonta tauta. Now, let's look at the difference between the first two sentences and the third sentence. And that's basically the use of tus, which is accusative plural. Now, let's look at the translation. I see the men. Tus is masculine accusative. Legonta is masculine present plural. I see the men who are saying these things. Or I see those who are saying these things. Now, and the last sentence is blepo tuon adelphon tes leguses tauta. Now, we made the sentence a little bit more complicated because we add a direct object for the subject here before we put in the object of the verb, which comes up as a participle leguses. So, I see the brother of the woman, Tes. Tes is feminine article, leguses is feminine accusative. And so we have, I see the brother of the woman who is saying these things. Now, in its function as an adjective, the participle may also be used as an adjectival modifier. In other words, something that modifies the adjective. If you are going to use the participle as an adjectival modifier, the participle will always be in the attributive position with the noun, and it will take the longer of the two possible ways of writing. Now, what do we mean by this? Let's look at this example. O legon apostolos, or o apostolos o legon. These two sentences will mean the saying apostle or the apostle saying. The saying apostle. Now the longer format is o apostolos o legon. Remember, in the attributive position, your substantive, your noun, or the adjective will always carry the definite article. So that's why here, legon carries a definite article, and here, legon also have the definite article. But in the adjectival construction, you will use the longer one, which is o apostolos o legon. So, o apostolos o legon tauta will now mean the apostle who is saying these things. The apostle who is saying, so this gives you a relative translation. This brings us to a very important issue in the function of participles. When the participle is in the attributive position, that is, when the participle carries the article, it has to be given a relative translation, as in the one who. Remember the example we just gave now. However, when the participle is in the predicate position, that is, it does not carry the article, it is given a temporal translation, as in while or as. And let's look at the following examples. Eblepsa ton apostolon legonta tauta. Eblepsa ton apostolon. If you look at this sentence very well, you discover that it is apostolon that carries the definite article and not your participle legonta. So our translation would be, I saw the apostle, eblepsa ton apostolon, while he was saying these things. Or, I saw the apostle as he was saying these things. Now, if you do eblepsa ton apostolon ton legonta, which is going to be an attributive position, it will read, I saw the apostle who was saying these things, which is a relative. So this is a relative translation. This is a temporal translation. Now, let us look at the aorist form of the participle. We are still using luo as our example, the first aorist. So here you have lusas, feminine lusasa, neuter lusan. Lusantos, lusases, lusantos. Lusanti, lusase, lusanti. Lusanta, lusasan, lusan. And the plural, lusantes, lusasai, lusanta. Lusaton, lusason, lusantan. Lusasi, lusasais, lusasi. Lusantas, lusaseas, lusanta. So look at this paradigm and study it so that you'll be able to write any other word like this. Now we are now coming to the first aorist middle participle. Remember the one we did last is active voice. Now this we are going to the passive voice. Now lusamenos, lusamene, lusamenon. Lusamenu, lusamenes, lusamenu. Lusameno, lusamene, lusameno, lusamenon, lusamenen, lusamenon. In the plural, lusamenoi, lusamenai, lusamena. Lusamenon, 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 lusamenois, lusamenais, lusamenois, lusamenus, lusamenas, lusamena. Now we are going to the second aorist, active participle. Now remember that the second aorist, we can no longer make use of luo, so we are making use of lipo, which is from, lipo. Now in a singular we have lipon, liposa, lipon, lipontos, liposes, lipontos, liponti, lipose, liponti, liponta, liposan, lipon. Lipontes, lipomene, liponta, liponton, lipomenes, liponton, liposi, lipomene, liposi, and finally lipontas, lipomenen, lipontas. Now we look at the middle voice of the second aorist, still using lipo. Lipomenos, lipomene, lipomenon, lipomenu, lipomenes, lipomenu, lipomeno, lipomenen, lipomeno, lipomenon, lipomenen, lipomenon. In the plural, lipomenoi, lipomenai, lipomena, lipomenon, 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 lipomenois, lipomenais, lipomenois, and finally lipomenus, lipomenas, lipomena. Now let's talk about the time and the kind of action in aorist participle. Now the kind of action in aorist is punctiliar. That is, it is a finished action. We have said this before. Now the time of the action is antecedent to the action of the main verb. In other words, the action of the aorist participle will have taken place before the action of the main verb. In verbs other than the indicative mood, stress is always on the kind of action. Now, this is the reason behind the absence of the augment in participles, infinitives, and subjunctives. because it indicates the action in the past time. The use of the participles with or without the article is similar to that of the present participle. You can revise this again. In translating the present participles, good English expression should be used. For example, loosas will be translated having loosed, or when he had loosed, or after he had loosed, while o loosas will be translated as the one who loosed, or he who loosed. Note the following examples, especially the temporal or relative use of the relation of the action to the participle to that of the main verb. O anthropos aipon tauta blepai ton kurion. The man, aipon, having said these things, blepai ton kurion, is saying the Lord. Now you discover that the saying took place before the saying, because blepai is your main verb, aipon, which is saying, is in the aorist. Second sentence, aipon tauta exelthen ek tu oiku. Having said these things, or after he had said these things, or when he had said these things, he went out of the house. So the saying came before the going. O anthropos, o aipon, tauta, elthen, aiston, oikon. The man who had said these things. Remember, this is still aorist. We are putting this in the attributive position, and that is why it's taking a relative translation. O anthropos, the man, o aipon, he who had said. So the man who had said that tauta these things, elthen eyes went into the house. And the last sentence, o aipon tauta, elthen eyes ton oikon. The man who had said these things went into the house. Remember, aipon here is still carrying this, and this is a substantive use of the participle. Now, let's look at the aorist passive participle of luo. Passive voice now. Now, in the masculine, we have lutais, lutaisa, luthen, lutentos, lutaises, lutentos, lutenti, lutensai, lutese, lutenti, lutenta, lutaisan, luthen. In the plural, luthentes, lutaisai, lutenta, luthenton, lutaison, luthenton, lutaisi, lutaisais, lutaisi, lutentas, lutaisas, lutenta. Now, if you look very well, you discover that we have a new word coming here. A new letter, please. And the aorist participle is formed following the example above. The augment will be dropped as usual. The corresponding endings will be added. And then the first aorist will have the theta as a tense suffix, but not in the second aorist. So the aorist passive participle is used like the other participle. The kind of action is punctiliar. The time of action is antecedent to that of the main verb, and the voice indicates that the subject is receiving the action. The participle may be translated in several ways. Now, let's look at these translations here. O luthais anthropos exelthen ektu oiku. Now remember that this is your participle, passive voice from Luo. The man who was loosed. The man who was loosed went out of the house. Or the man who had been loosed. Whichever way, take a translation that shows clearly that the action has taken place before. And the second sentence, sothais doxazai ton kurion. Having been saved, he will praise the Lord. Or after he has been saved, he will praise the Lord. Please note that the use of the word in its context must always determine your translation. Now, this is where we are going to end our video topic, but please make sure you read this over and you do a lot of practices until we meet next time. It's your facilitator, Olubi Adewale, that is saying, have a pleasant week ahead.